Claire Dawson stood on the balcony of her beach villa in the Maldives, the wind brushing her hair and the sea stretching endlessly before her. The turquoise water shimmered under the golden sun, and for a moment, she almost forgot how lonely she had felt for years. The trip wasn't her idea. Her son, Ethan, had surprised her with it, booking everything without asking. He had said, "Mom, you've worked your whole life. You deserve something just for you." Those words echoed in her mind as she watched the waves crash softly against the sand below. It had been a long time since anyone had done something so thoughtful for her. Claire was 50, recently divorced, and still learning how to live for herself. The last 2 decades had been about raising Ethan, paying bills, and pretending to be strong. She had forgotten how to breathe without worry, how to smile without reason. The Maldives felt like another world. Too beautiful, too peaceful, almost as if life wanted to give her one last chance to feel something again. That morning, as she unpacked, Ethan knocked on her door. "Close your eyes," he said with a grin. She laughed, shaking her head. "What now?" He placed a small box in her hands. When she opened it, she froze. Inside was a light blue swimsuit, elegant and simple, with a matching shawl. "Ethan," she whispered, half embarrassed, half touched. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said softly. "You never do anything for yourself, Mom. You always hide behind big dresses and long sleeves. You deserve to feel confident again. Just try it. For me." His voice wasn't teasing. It was filled with care, the kind only a son with a good heart could give. Claire looked at him and saw not the little boy she once carried, but a grown man who genuinely loved her. She smiled faintly, trying to hide the tears forming in her eyes. "All right," she said. "I'll try." When Ethan left, Claire held the swimsuit against her chest. It wasn't just fabric. It was a symbol of something she had lost. Her spark, her joy, the part of her that believed she was still beautiful. For years, she had buried herself under responsibilities, forgetting that she was more than a mother, more than a woman with a broken marriage. She had once been full of dreams too. She used to paint, travel, and dance. Somewhere along the line, life had taken all of that from her. But now, standing in a paradise she never expected to visit, she felt something stir inside her, a quiet reminder that maybe it wasn't too late to start again. She changed into the swimsuit, wrapping the shawl around her shoulders. When she looked in the mirror, she hesitated. Time had left its marks, fine lines, soft curves, traces of years gone by. But she looked alive. She smiled at her reflection, the kind of smile that felt new and honest. The ocean outside seemed to call her name, and for once, she didn't ignore it. Stepping out onto the sand, she spotted Ethan sitting under a palm tree, sipping coconut water and waving at her with that familiar grin. "See? I told you it would look perfect," he said proudly. She laughed, shaking her head. "You really have too much confidence in your mother," he chuckled. "No, Mom. I just see what you can't." They walked along the beach together, the sun warm on their backs, the sound of waves wrapping around them like a song. Claire felt light, almost young again. Ethan told stories about his college friends, his new job, and how he had planned the trip for months. He said he wanted her to see that life could still be beautiful after everything. Each word from him softened something inside her that had been cold for years. As they walked, Claire realized how much she had missed moments like this. Simple, quiet, real. It wasn't about the Maldives or the ocean. It was about connection, love, and the gentle way time could heal what was broken. Ethan's kindness reminded her that even when life changes, love never disappears. It just grows in different forms. When they returned to the villa, the sky turned orange and pink, painting the sea with color. Claire stood at the balcony again, watching the sunset. She thought of her younger self, the girl who once dreamed of faraway places, the woman who gave everything for her family. Now, she was here, standing in the middle of those dreams, thanks to her son. That night, she wrote in her journal for the first time in years, "Maybe this is where my story begins again. Maybe happiness isn't gone, it's just waiting for me to notice it." Outside, the waves whispered softly, like an old friend calling her name. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt peace. She didn't know what the rest of the trip would bring, but something inside her had already changed. The gift wasn't just a swimsuit. It was a reminder that she was still alive, still worthy of feeling beautiful, still capable of joy. And as the stars began to appear above the Maldivian sky, Claire Dawson smiled, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The sun was setting over the Maldives, painting the ocean in shades of gold and rose. Claire walked slowly toward the beach, her blue swimsuit hidden beneath a light shawl. She still felt shy, but she had promised Ethan she would try. When she reached the shore, she saw him waiting with 2 coconut drinks and a wide grin. "There she is," he said warmly. "You look beautiful, Mom." His tone was sincere, free of teasing, and that made her heart soften. Claire smiled, embarrassed but touched. "You sound just like your father used to," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan's smile faded a little. He rarely heard her talk about his father. There was always silence around that part of her past. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he should ask more. But the sound of waves and the calm of the evening gave him courage. "Were you ever happy with him?" he asked carefully. Claire stared at the horizon, where the sky met the sea. "At first, yes," she said softly. "He was kind, full of dreams. But people change, Ethan. Sometimes love fades without anyone meaning for it to happen. Life gets heavy. Promises get lost." Her words hung in the air, gentle but full of sadness. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, realizing that his mother wasn't just strong. She was human too. They sat down near the water, their feet buried in the sand. For the first time, they talked openly, not as parent and child, but as 2 people who had both known disappointment. "You know," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "I used to think love was supposed to be perfect, but now I think it's about showing up, even when things get hard." Claire nodded slowly. "Love isn't perfect, Ethan. It's not always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's choosing someone even when everything feels broken. That's what I tried to do. But one person can't hold up an entire marriage alone." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with respect. "You've held up more than just a marriage, Mom. You held up our whole life." His words pierced through her like sunlight breaking clouds. She had never realized how much her son saw, how much he understood. She smiled faintly, blinking back tears. "I didn't always do it right," she whispered. "You did enough," he replied. They sat in silence again, the sound of the waves filling the space between their words. The air smelled like salt and coconuts, and somewhere nearby, laughter drifted from another family enjoying the evening. But Claire's world still, centered around that moment, sitting beside the boy she raised, realizing he had grown into a man with a kind soul. The ocean was calm that evening, the breeze soft against their faces. Ethan leaned back on his hands, looking up at the glowing sky. "You know, I used to be scared of growing up," he admitted. "I was afraid I'd end up lonely, like you after the divorce." Claire turned to him, her eyes gentle but firm. Don't be afraid of being alone, Ethan. It's not a punishment. Sometimes it's how you find yourself again. She looked back at the horizon. I thought my life ended when your father left. But now, sitting here, I see that I just stopped living for a while. It's never too late to start again. Her words seemed to settle deep inside Ethan. He looked at her not as his mother, but as a person rediscovering her strength. You're right, he said softly. Maybe that's what love really is. Learning to start again, no matter how many times life changes. Claire smiled, a small, proud smile. You're wiser than I was at your age. He laughed. You taught me most of what I know. As night fell, lanterns along the beach flickered to life. The resort began to glow with soft, golden light. Ethan stood and reached out a hand to help her up. Come on, he said. Let's walk a bit before dinner. They walked along the shoreline, the waves brushing over their feet. Claire's shawl fluttered in the wind as she listened to Ethan talk about his life, his work, his dreams, his fears. She realized how much she had missed being part of these conversations, how much time had slipped away while she was busy surviving. But now, in this peaceful paradise, she felt it returning. The bond between them, stronger and more honest than before. Mum, Ethan said quietly after a while. You know what I think? I think this trip isn't just for you. It's for both of us. We both needed to remember how to breathe. She looked at him, her heart full. Maybe you're right, she said with a gentle smile. Maybe healing isn't something you do alone. The stars began to appear, one by one, like tiny promises in the dark sky. They stopped walking and stood for a moment, watching the waves sparkle under the moonlight. Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace mixed with warmth, the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. You're really glowing tonight, he said. I think this place is working its magic. Claire laughed softly. Maybe it's not the place, she said. Maybe it's the company. He grinned. Then I guess I'm doing something right. The night grew quieter, the only sound the rhythm of waves against the shore. They stood there together, the air filled with unspoken love. Not romantic, but deep, timeless and real. Claire felt lighter, freer, as if the ocean had washed away years of sadness. When they finally turned back toward the villa, Claire glanced at Ethan and smiled to herself. The trip her son had planned wasn't just a vacation. It was a turning point. He had given her more than a gift. He had given her a reason to look forward again. And as the stars shimmered above them, Claire realized that love doesn't always come from where we expect it. Sometimes it comes from the person who has been beside us all along, quietly, reminding us that we still have so much life left to live. The morning sun glowed over the ocean as the resort announced a snorkeling trip. Ethan was already excited. Come on, Mum, it'll be fun, he said, handing Claire a life jacket. She laughed nervously, unsure. Ethan, I haven't been underwater in years. He grinned. Then it's time to change that. Something about his confidence made her say yes. She had spent so many years saying no to life. Maybe this was her chance to try again. On the boat, the sea breeze brushed against her skin. The water sparkled like glass, and the islands looked like green jewels floating in blue silk. Claire felt nervous but alive. Ethan stood beside her, adjusting her mask. You've got this, Mom. Just breathe slowly and enjoy the view. His words calmed her more than he knew. When they jumped into the water, the world around her shifted completely. Under the surface, everything was quiet and bright. Fish of every color glided around her, the sunlight dancing over the coral below. It felt like she had stepped into another world, one without pain, without noise, without fear. For the first time in years, Claire wasn't thinking about the past or worrying about the future. She was just there, floating free and alive. When she surfaced, Ethan was already waiting on the boat, waving and cheering. "You did it," he shouted, his smile wide and proud. Claire laughed, water dripping down her face. "I actually did." She climbed back aboard, and Ethan wrapped a towel around her shoulders. "See? You're braver than you think," he said softly. She looked at him, her heart swelling. "I had to be brave," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to raise you." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You didn't just raise me, Mom. You showed me what love really looks like. Even when it's hard." His words caught her by surprise. She turned her face toward the sea, trying to hide the emotion in her eyes. For years, she had believed she'd failed somehow, that she hadn't given him enough. But hearing him say that changed something deep inside her. They spent the afternoon exploring tiny islands, eating fresh fruit, and laughing about everything and nothing. Claire felt lighter than she had in years. Every laugh, every wave, every small moment seemed to wash away the heaviness that had lived in her heart. That evening, after they returned to the resort, the sky turned shades of gold and pink. Ethan suggested a walk. The beach was quiet, the sand cool beneath their feet. The sound of the waves was soft and steady, like a heartbeat. Claire watched the sun melt into the horizon and felt an ache of gratitude. "You know," she said, "I used to think my best days were behind me. But now I'm not so sure." Ethan smiled. "Good, because I think your best days are just starting." She looked at him, realizing how grown he truly was. Kind, steady, thoughtful. The boy who once needed her now stood beside her, like a man who could guide her when she stumbled. "When did you grow up so much?" she asked with a soft laugh. "Probably while you were too busy taking care of everyone else," he replied. They both laughed, but behind her smile, Claire felt something stir. Not sadness, but recognition. She had given everything to her family, to her son, to her responsibilities, that she had forgotten to give something to herself. Now, surrounded by beauty, she realized it wasn't too late to live again, to feel joy without guilt, to dream without fear. As night fell, they stopped by a small cafe near the beach. The tables were lit with candles, and soft music drifted through the warm air. They shared a simple dinner, grilled fish, tropical fruit, and laughter that felt like medicine. At one point, Ethan said, "You know, Mom, this trip isn't just about relaxing. It's about reminding you that you still matter." Claire looked at him, deeply moved. "You've always been the best thing I ever did," she said quietly. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "And you're the best part of my story," he said. His eyes shone with honesty. Claire's throat tightened, and she smiled through the warmth rising in her chest. Later, they walked back to the villa under a sky full of stars. The air was soft, the waves gentle. Claire looked up at the stars, thinking about all the times she had prayed for a new beginning, and how life had quietly answered her through the person walking beside her. When they reached their villa, Ethan turned to her and said, "You seem different tonight. Lighter." She smiled. "Maybe I finally let go of something I didn't know I was holding." "Good," he said, "because you deserve to feel free." Inside, Claire stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit water. She thought about her life, the sacrifices, the heartbreak, the endless responsibilities. But tonight, none of that defined her. She was a woman rediscovering herself, a mother who had learned that love doesn't end when life changes. It simply transforms. As she listened to the ocean, she realized that Ethan hadn't just given her a vacation. He had given her permission to live again. The little boy who once needed her guidance had become the man reminding her to look forward. For years, she had buried her dreams beneath duty, but now they felt close again, like stars returning to a dark sky. Claire took a deep breath and smiled, whispering to herself, "Maybe I'm finally coming back to life." Outside, the waves whispered softly, and the air smelled like salt and flowers. The island felt alive, and so did she. The Maldives had become more than a destination. It had become a reminder that no matter how far you fall, the heart always knows how to rise again. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Claire felt peace, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally believed that life still had beauty waiting for her. And for the first time in years, she looked forward to tomorrow. The final evening in the Maldives arrived faster than Claire expected. The week had passed like a dream. The ocean swims, the laughter, the quiet talks with Ethan. She felt lighter, more alive than she had in years. That morning, she watched the sunrise from her balcony, the sky painted in orange and gold. She thought about how far she had come, from a woman hiding behind her fears to someone learning to breathe again. She didn't know that Ethan had one last surprise waiting for her. When evening fell, he knocked on her door, dressed in a crisp white shirt. "Come with me," he said, his smile playful but secretive. Claire followed him down a path lined with lanterns that flickered like fireflies. The soft sound of waves guided them toward the beach. When they reached the shore, she stopped in surprise. A table was set near the water, glowing under string lights. Candles flickered and soft music played in the background. "Ethan," she whispered, her heart swelling. "What is all this?" He smiled gently. "Our last night here. I wanted to make it special." "You deserve it, Mom." Claire covered her mouth for a moment, touched. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "That's why I wanted to." They sat down, the smell of grilled fish and fresh fruit in the air. The waiter served them dinner, then quietly left them alone. The sound of the ocean surrounded them, calm and steady. Claire looked at the waves shimmering in the moonlight. "This feels unreal," she said softly. "Like I'm living someone else's life." Ethan leaned back, smiling. "No, Mom, this is your life. You've just been too busy taking care of everyone else to notice how beautiful it can be." His words hit her deeply. For years, she had existed in routine. Work, home, worry, repeat. But here, under the stars, she realized she didn't just want to exist anymore. She wanted to live. As the night grew quieter, Ethan said, "You know, when I planned this trip, I thought it was just a vacation. But I think it's more than that." Claire tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He looked at her with the same honesty that always disarmed her. "I think we both needed this. I needed to remember where I came from, and you needed to remember who you are." Her eyes glistened. "You always say the right things," she said softly. He smiled. "I learned from the best." They talked for hours, about childhood memories, about mistakes, about the future. Claire told him things she had never said before. How scared she'd been after the divorce, how empty the house felt, how she pretended to be strong because she didn't want him to worry. Ethan listened quietly, sometimes reaching out to hold her hand. When the music changed to a slow tune, he stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me?" She laughed nervously. "Oh, Ethan, I haven't danced in forever." "Then it's time you start again," he said simply. So she stood and took his hand. They danced barefoot on the cool sand, the waves brushing their feet. The moon hung above them, casting a silver glow across the water. Claire's laughter mixed with the ocean breeze as Ethan spun her gently. For a moment she forgot everything. Her age, her worries, the years she had lost. She was just a woman, dancing freely under the stars. "You're glowing," Ethan said quietly. She smiled, eyes shining. "Maybe it's the moonlight." "Maybe," he said. "But I think it's more than that." As they swayed to the music, Claire felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about the trip or the island. It was about finding herself again. The version of her that had been buried under years of silence and sacrifice. She looked at her son and realized that his love had helped her heal in ways words never could. When the song ended, they sat back down, watching the waves roll in. "You know," she said softly, "when you gave me that swimsuit, I thought you were just teasing me. But it turned out to be the start of everything." Ethan